Dear students, today we are going to discuss about carbon cycle and the role of microorganisms in carbon cycle. So, as we know, carbon cycle means the movement of carbon in elemental and combined states on Earth. Carbon cycle is a process where carbon compounds are interchanged among the biosphere, geosphere, hydrosphere, atmosphere, etc. of Earth. Carbon is present in highly reduced forms such as methane and organic matter, etc. And it is also present in more oxidized forms such as carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, etc. In different forms, carbon is a principal element in various cell systems. The microorganisms are having an important role in various aspects of the carbon cycle. In general, the carbon cycle is divided into two, a short-term carbon cycling and a long-term carbon cycling. This division is based upon how long the carbon cycling takes to occur. So the short-term carbon cycling involves the annual changes that occur within various spheres of Earth, such as atmosphere, terrestrial and marine ecosystems, etc. This is termed as short term since the movement of carbon only takes relatively short time that may vary from minutes to years. Why the long term carbon cycling is more slower? It takes thousands to millions of years to complete. The excess carbons from the short term cycling, they are getting stored in various reservoirs and thus they enter the long-term cycle. Formation of hydrocarbons which we use as fuels are examples of carbon which are involved in the long-term carbon cycling. Now coming into the steps of a carbon cycle, following are the main steps that are involved in the process of carbon cycle. The first one is the entry of carbon into the atmosphere. Carbon enter in the form of carbon dioxide either through the process of respiration or through the process of combustion. Respiration is a process by which organisms release energy. During this process of respiration, the organisms will convert or carbon dioxide will be getting released from the organic material from various organisms. And combustion is a process of burning by which also carbon will release the atmosphere in the form of carbon dioxide or carbon monoxide. The second step in carbon cycle is the carbon dioxide absorption by producers. Here, the carbon dioxide enters the photosynthetic process. The organisms which are involved in carrying out this carbon dioxide absorption or photosynthesis are the plants, algae, and photosynthetic microorganisms. They will transform carbon dioxide into sugars during the process of photosynthesis where they receive energy from solar inputs. During photosynthesis, plants, algae, the photosynthetic bacteria, etc. absorb carbon dioxide and create carbohydrate. The third step in carbon cycle is the passing of the carbon compounds in the food chain. The carbon compounds which are formed in the primary producers during photosynthesis, they will enter the food chain and reach the animals when they consume these primary producers. The fourth stage or step in carbon cycle is the return of the carbon to the atmosphere. This again occurs through the processes of respiration and decomposition. The plants and animals, their dead remains and their waste materials, they will decompose by the microbial action, and during this decomposition carbon will get returned to the atmosphere in various reduced or oxidized forms of carbon. And during respiration, which is the reverse of photosynthesis, the plants and animals, they will release energy contained in sugars for their metabolism, and thereby the carbohydrate will get converted back to carbon dioxide, which get released back into the atmosphere. So these are the 4 stages in a carbon cycle. We can see the various procedures or the processes that happen during the carbon cycle. Photosynthesis, the breathing of the animals, whereby during respiration carbon dioxide gets released back into the atmosphere. The gaseous exchange of plants, also there will be absorption of carbon dioxide during photosynthesis, and during respiration carbon dioxide will get released into the atmosphere. Burning of fuel, which release carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide back to atmosphere. The decomposition of dead or waste remains from the plants, animals, etc. upon the action by microorganisms also will cycle carbon into different forms. There are various reservoirs of carbon in various spheres of Earth, and in atmosphere the carbon is present mainly in the form of carbon dioxide, even though carbon monoxide is also present. In the terrestrial biosphere, carbon is incorporated as organic carbon in the living beings such as plants, animals, microorganisms, etc. And in ocean also, carbon is present in the creatures living in the ocean, and also a little amount of carbon and inorganic carbon is dissolved in the ocean water. And in geosphere, the excessive carbon is trapped deep within the Earth's crust in the forms of various sediments and fossil fuels. The carbon is also trapped in the inner parts, the mantle and core of Earth, which often leaks into the atmosphere during volcanic activities. So let us look into the carbon cycle in the atmosphere. As we said, the major quantity of carbon is present in the form of carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide and methane. We know these are greenhouse gases and they cause atmospheric heating. The carbon dioxide from the atmosphere is absorbed mainly by the terrestrial and oceanic biospheres, the primary producers, through photosynthesis. The major photosynthetic organisms, as we discussed before, are the plants, algae, cyanobacteria and other photosynthetic bacteria. The carbon dioxide also falls down during rain. The methane present are also little bit absorbed and utilized by certain microorganisms. Coming to the carbon cycle on land by the terrestrial biosphere, the carbon is present as organic matter in all the living creatures living on the Earth's surface. The photosynthesis is a process by which the carbon dioxide is absorbed and fixed in to various organic carbon molecules by the primary producers, and when the higher levels of organisms, the consumers, consume these primary producers, the carbon reaches the next and next levels of the trophic levels or the food chain. Majority of the carbon exists in the body and some exit or get released from the body in the form of carbon dioxide through respiration. After their life cycle from the dead remains, the organic matter, the carbon will get released back into the atmosphere by the decomposing action by the decomposers or the microorganisms. In the oceanic carbon cycle, the oceans act as a carbon sink. It absorbs more carbon. The levels of carbon that get released from the ocean is much less than the carbon that is being absorbed and deposited in the ocean. So ocean act as a carbon sink, and marine animals have carbon getting converted to carbonate in their hard shells, which accumulate on the sea floor after their life, and these hard shells will eventually get converted to limestone. The carbon from the limestone get released back into the atmosphere when they are getting exposed to air by weathering action. Now let us look into the role of microorganisms in carbon cycling. There are two fundamental microbial processes driving the cycle, and they are the carbon fixation and carbon respiration. So carbon fixation means the immobilization or conversion of carbon into various organic forms. It is getting immobilized into various compounds. The various processes of carbon fixation are photosynthesis, methanogenesis and methylotrophy, acetogenesis, and carbon monoxide cycling. The carbon get released back into the atmosphere through the processes of respiration, decomposition, and fermentation. Now let us look into detail about the carbon fixation. The carbon fixation is carried out by the activities of both photoautotrophic and chemoautotrophic microbes. The first method of carbon fixation and the most prominent method of carbon fixation is photosynthesis, which is carried out by photoautotrophs mainly. The carbon fixation occurs mainly through the activities of cyanobacteria, green algae, and photosynthetic bacteria. And some aerobic chemolithoautotrophs also fix carbon into organic forms. There are different types of photosynthetic bacteria that are widely distributed in both terrestrial and aquatic environments. In these habitats, these photosynthetic bacteria act as primary producers and they have a crucial role in the food chain. Some examples of these photosynthetic bacteria are blue-green algae or cyanobacteria, purple photosynthetic proteobacteria, photosynthetic heliobacteria, green sulfur bacteria, and filamentous green non-sulfur bacteria. Cyanococcus elongatus, nostoc, anabina, etc. are examples for blue-green algae or cyanobacteria. Rhodobacter, chromatium, etc. are examples for purple photosynthetic proteobacteria. Heliobacteria is an example for photosynthetic heliobacteria. Chlorobium is an example for green sulfur bacteria, and chlorophyxy is a filamentous green non-sulfur bacteria. Apart from these photosynthetic microorganisms, some aerobic chemolithoautotrophs. They derive energy from chemical reactions for the fixation of carbon. They are also responsible for carbon fixation. Next method of carbon fixation is methanogenesis and methylotrophy. Some methanogenic archaebacteria, which are known as methanogens, they convert carbon dioxide to methane under anaerobic conditions. This produced methane will get released into the atmosphere. The methane formation by microorganisms is known as methanogenesis, and the bacteria capable of producing methane are known as methanogens. They are generally obligate anaerobic archaebacteria. Examples are Methanospirillum, Methanococcus, etc. These organisms are generally present in habitats such as saturated soils and wetlands, paddy fields, marsh, landfills, etc. and also inside the gut of termites and ruminants. These organisms can grow only under strict anaerobic conditions. The methanogens are capable of producing methane either autotrophically or heterotrophically. Autotrophically, they fix carbon dioxide to form methane. Heterotrophically, they can fix carbon dioxide by utilizing acetate, methanol, or fumate. Now, let us discuss methylotrophs and methanotrophs. What are methylotrophs? They are organisms that can use methane or methanol as a source of both carbon and energy. Examples are Methanosarcina, which can use methane as well as it can produce methane. Methylococcus capsulatus, it uses methane as a carbon and energy source, Piscia pastorus, which can use methanol as a carbon and energy source. So methylotrophs are organisms that can use methane or methanol as a source of carbon and energy. Some methylotrophs are methanotrophs. So methanotrophs are methylotrophs which can metabolize methane as the only source of carbon and energy. They cannot use methanol. They use methane as the only source of carbon and energy. Methylococcus capsulatus is an example for methanotroph. The next mode of carbon fixation utilized by certain groups of microorganisms is acetogenesis. This is carried out by a group of facultatively chemoautotrophic anaerobic bacteria. They reduce carbon dioxide using hydrogen to form acetate. This mode of metabolism is energetically less efficient than methanogenesis. Examples for organisms carrying out this type of acetogenesis is Clostridium thermoaceticum and Acetobacterium woodii. The next method of carbon fixing is a mode of metabolism known as carbon monoxide cycling. The major source of carbon monoxide in the atmosphere is the photochemical oxidation of methane and other hydrocarbons. Some levels of carbon monoxide are also formed biologically during microbial and animal respiration. An obscure side reaction during photosynthesis in photosynthetic microorganisms and plants also release some levels of carbon monoxide into the atmosphere. Some of these carbon monoxide formed are converted to carbon dioxide photochemically. The microbial processes are mainly responsible for the carbon monoxide conversion both in ocean and in soil. Aerobic and anaerobic microorganisms are involved in the process of carbon monoxide conversion. Aerobically, the carboxylobacteria such as Pseudomonas carboxyloflava and Pseudomonas carboxyhydrogena, they can utilize carbon monoxide as both carbon and energy source. And during their metabolism, they will convert carbon monoxide into carbon dioxide. Anaerobically, some methanogens such as Methanosarcina barkeri, it can reduce carbon monoxide to methane. Sometimes carbon monoxide is reduced to acetate by acetogens such as Clostridium thermoaceticum. Now, the fixed carbon in the form of various organic materials get recycled back into the atmosphere through the processes of respiration, decomposition and fermentation in which microorganisms are involved. Coming to respiration first, the carbon dioxide is released from plants, animals, etc. by respiration. The fixed carbon in the form of organic material in the cellular structures of plants, animals, microorganisms, etc. get returned back into the atmosphere by a variety of different pathways of respiration. This is present both in autotrophic and heterotrophic organisms. The carbon from organic materials are also recycled back through the process of decomposition of organic material. This is carried out by heterotrophic microorganisms. The heterotrophic microorganisms utilize organic materials of either plant, animal or microbial origin as a substrate for their metabolism. They will take up some carbon into their biomass used for their reproduction, and the rest of the carbon will be getting released back as metabolites, the metabolic acids, or as carbon dioxide back to the atmosphere. Soil acts as a great reservoir for carbon, in which the carbon is present as degraded organic material complexes known as humus, which may remain in the soil for a longer periods of time. The next method of carbon return back to atmosphere is fermentation. In anaerobic environments, microorganisms utilize organic carbon compounds to yield energy in a process known as fermentation. Fermentation is a complex series of biochemical reactions in which a sugar is converted to carbon dioxide and alcohol. There are different types of fermentations, and these are generally carried out by yeast and different types of bacteria. The fermentation plays a major role in the carbon cycle present in anaerobic sediments, such as in freshwater, sewage fermenters, or in the digestive apparatus of vertebrates. So we were discussing about carbon cycle and the role of microorganisms in carbon cycle. Thank you so much for listening.